Joker Folie à Deux hits theaters this weekend. Folie à Deux, of course, as we all know, is a French phrase meaning two folies. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my non-spoiler review of Joker Folie à Deux, which had its fan screenings last night in IMAX, that's the one I attended, and hits theaters this Friday. Before we jump into that though, I just wanted to very briefly here at the top acknowledge the devastation that is still really unfolding around Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and particularly North Carolina from Hurricane Helene, which hit last week. The scope of the devastation in North Carolina especially is just beginning to come into focus, so I wanted to direct your attention to some links down in the description below to different organizations that are doing the best that they can right now to help the people in North Carolina. One of those organizations is the Red Cross. Another one is the official donation link for the state of North Carolina. I also linked to a GoFundMe campaign. GoFundMe is distributing these funds to various campaigns that are started by people that have been affected by Hurricane Helene. There's also a link to Operation Airdrop, which is a group of pilots who are delivering relief materials and supplies to parts of North Carolina, especially parts that are inaccessible by road. And then finally, there's a link to the Asheville, North Carolina Humane Society, which is working to shelter and try to find the owners of displaced pets and animals after Hurricane Helene. There are a lot of other organizations that you can donate to, and you can find those out on your own, but I wanted to just kind of throw a few your direction because there are a lot of people out there that need some help and will need help for the next days, weeks, and probably months to come. All right, so let's jump into Joker Folie à Deux, which is, of course, the sequel to 2019's Joker. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years since the first movie came out. And basically, the entire creative team returns from that first movie, which, of course, was met with much acclaim and also some criticism. And when I look back on my thoughts of the first Joker movie, I was one of the voices that was expressing concern as far as what the effect of the movie could be. And I've seen some mockery of those concerns in the years afterward. To be fair, at that time, I've received in my life 2 threats that I have felt necessary to elevate to a law enforcement level. Both of them came in the couple of years before Joker came out, and they also both involved DC properties, one of them involving the character of the Joker directly. My review for Suicide Squad was not met well by a particular person. So I was a little bit more sensitive to some of the things that happened in that first Joker movie at the time. Now that I've gone back and looked at that first Joker movie with a little bit more time and distance, I still think that it is a brilliant lead performance from Joaquin Phoenix. He absolutely deserved the Academy Award. I think the artistry in that film is incredible, but I do also still think that the messaging of the film was a little bit muddled. I thought there was some mixed messaging, intentional or not, that maybe did lead some people to perhaps take away a few things from the movie that weren't intended or perhaps weren't the best things to take away. Joker Folie à Deux is what I actually look for in a sequel. It's bold, it's ambitious, it has something to say, and it takes the storyline in some new and interesting directions. However, I also think it's a movie that's disjointed, uneven, and has some creative decisions whose ingenuity I admire, but whose execution I don't necessarily think was the best. This sequel is set 2 years after the first Joker film. Arthur Fleck is now an inmate at Arkham when his interest is piqued by another inmate named Lee, short for Harleen Quinzel, who's played by Lady Gaga. Folie à Deux, all jokes aside from the opening of this video, is a French term meaning a shared psychosis, or basically a delusion that gets passed from one person to another. And really, that is the perfect description of Joker and Harley Quinn's relationship, both in this movie and in pretty much every other iteration of the characters. However, this is not your typical comic book movie, even less so than the first Joker, which was already wildly unconventional. This is not about building the mythology around Joker, the DC character. It's about digging deeper into Arthur Fleck and his Joker persona. Any comic book connections are surface level at best and completely unrelated to the story at hand, and I actually don't mind that. I wondered after the first Joker movie if director Todd Phillips really understood or had a good grasp on what the takeaway from the film should be. And one thing that this sequel proves is that it seems like he did, which is a good thing, But I think the other thing that it risks is that there are people who maybe took some of the wrong things away from the first Joker movie that are going to be pretty set up for disappointment with this second one. This version of Joker is not and should never have been considered cool, and these two films neatly split Arthur's story into The Rise, which would be the first movie, and then The Aftermath, which would be this movie. Joker's moment of triumph has come and gone. This movie is about what's next. And this review is a little tough for me to crack because there are a lot of threads in this movie that I thought were done well throughout until we got to the conclusion. But I also think there were a lot of endpoints for some of the storylines that I really, really liked, but that I don't think were established well enough at the beginning parts of the film. So I kind of have opposite feelings about different parts of this movie. That may be because this is, as advertised, a movie of many feels and tones, from dark comedy to musical to courtroom procedural to satire to the heaviest of psychological dramas. I don't think that it's accurate to describe this as a movie musical. There are a lot of musical numbers, but they're more flights of fancy. If I was going to compare this to any other movie musical, I would probably pick Chicago, which came out back in 2002, as the closest analogy as far as what the musical numbers are and what they mean in the film, although it's more abstract even than what you saw in Chicago. Although now that I think about it, a Joker rendition of Mr. Cellophane would have been pretty awesome in this movie. All of these different things, the tones, the genres, etc., can coexist in one movie, but it's got to be woven together pretty well for it to be a coherent whole, and this is a pretty loose web. There are so many sequences that work really, really well on their own, but that are jammed up next to things that just don't quite feel right. It's like taking the best parts of 6 different jigsaw puzzles and then taking those sections and trying to jam them together with the other parts of the other jigsaw puzzles. It's pretty, but it just doesn't quite all fit together. There is consistency on many levels of excellence, though. Joaquin Phoenix is once again great as Arthur Fleck / Joker, and he doesn't just deliver a repeat of his Oscar-winning performance. He follows his character down the rabbit hole, which leaves this performance less flashy, but I think just as devastating. Phoenix can be darkly hilarious, he can be pitiful, he can be terrifying, and he can do all of those things often in the same scene. It's a range that a lot of actors just aren't capable of. I know that he is getting this reputation for being difficult to work with, but you really can't argue with the work that he produces, and this is yet another excellent performance from him. I don't know necessarily if it's Oscar worthy, but it is excellent. Lady Gaga is also really good as Lee, or Harley Quinn. There's really an outstanding two-hander between her and Phoenix that's lurking inside this movie, and where their story went was one of my favorite overall arcs in the film, but it's muddied by the constant changes in style and story focus. I think this could have been a really, really strong movie if it had focused a little bit more on Joker and Harley without some of the other stuff that's surrounding it. But none of that is really Lady Gaga's fault as far as the structure of the film. She continues to demonstrate to me that she is, I think, a very good actress and also somebody who's consistently making very interesting choices as far as the movies that she chooses to appear in. Cinematographer Lawrence Sher returns to give the movie a grungy look fitting of the movie's 1980s New York setting, with the added bonus of the Technicolor pop that we see in the musical sequences. And Hildur Gudnadottir follows up her Oscar-winning score from the first film with more subtle work as her distinctive sound blends with the frequent use of existing songs and music. Like really this entire movie, the score of the film is a blend of what we've already seen in 2019's Joker and a lot of newer elements that add an interesting dynamic. I'm really interested to see what the reaction is going to be when this movie hits theaters, because I think that there are going to be a lot of people who think that this is an absolutely brilliant film, and I think that brilliance does exist in the film, but I think that there are going to be a lot of people that are very let down by it as well, especially the folks, like many of the citizens of Gotham in this movie, that elevated this version of Joker to kind of a folk hero. From a commercial standpoint, I'm also going to be curious to see what the word of mouth is, what the drop-off may be from week 1 to week 2, because again, while there are tonal similarities, this is a very, very different film from the first Joker movie, and it's kind of hard to get into without going into spoilers. But I think that the audience reaction can really go either way, and I think that it may tilt a little bit more negative than the first movie, but that's sort of the cost of doing business if you're going to push boundaries and take risks, which this movie very much does. It's a high risk, high reward proposition. Too often, sequels are about maintaining the status quo, coming back to basically do a copy of the original film. And I have to give Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix and the team behind this movie credit for not doing that. While it feels like the overall picture of this movie never really gels together, there is definitely vision here. And when I look at each individual piece of the movie, there's a lot to like. But to make a great movie, those pieces all have to come together. And I don't think that this movie quite gets there. So on my personal rating scale, I'm giving Joker Folie à Deux a provisional rating of it's good, with some flexibility really either way as I sit with the movie and think about it more. I actually look forward to processing the movie a lot more, maybe seeing it a second time, and really being able to jump into my thoughts when I do a spoiler review for the film later this week, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, this is a thinker. It's definitely not boring. It brings a lot of change, a lot of different stuff to the table. I'm just not sure what the reaction is going to be to a lot of the somewhat bold decisions that this movie's decided to make. So those are my thoughts on Joker Folie à Deux. What do you think? Are you excited to head back to the theaters to see it? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for spending part of your day here with me. Be sure to stay tuned right here to the channel for that spoiler review of Joker Folie à Deux later this week, as well as a review of Saturday Night, the look at the first episode of NBC's Saturday Night Live, one of my most anticipated films of the fall, as well as, who knows, maybe some other stuff. Also, be sure to check out the description below for those links about Hurricane Relief. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.